Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa and I'm the owner of seasonandserveblog.com. In today's video, we'll be making my recipe for ricotta-stuffed patty pan squash. This recipe is super seasonal since patty pan squash only come into season during the summer months and you have to enjoy them while they're around. I grew my patty pan squash in my garden this year and I grew 4 really large plants. I harvested so much so far and there's even more on the way. So if you want to learn how to make my ricotta stuffed patty pan squash, just keep on watching. We'll begin by preheating our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and as that preheats, we'll go ahead and prepare our squash. Here are the patty pan squash that I harvested from my garden, and I'll show you how to prepare them if you haven't prepared these before. Now since we're going to stuff the squash, we want to make sure it doesn't wobble around like this in our baking dish. So I'm going to take a sharp knife and cut a little slice off the bottom of the patty pan squash just so that it sits on a flat surface in our baking dish and doesn't move around. And next I'm going to cut off part of the top of the patty pan squash just so that we are able to stuff it. To hollow out the patty pan squash, I'm going to use a melon baller. If you don't have one of these, you can use a really small teaspoon and that works just as well. I like the melon baller since it makes these perfect little round shapes in the patty pan squash. I think it looks really cool. So you're just going to take your melon baller or your spoon and hollow out the inside, making sure not to go through the bottom of the patty pan squash or through the sides. You want to create a nice cup inside so that the ricotta sits in the middle. And once you have your first patty pan squash all hollowed out, it should look like this, so no punctures through the sides or the bottom. Then you're just going to repeat the process for all of your patty pan squash. Next we'll move on to making our filling, and the filling is super simple and only requires a few ingredients. So first I'm going to add some ricotta cheese to a large mixing bowl, along with some grated Parmesan, and I am using a microplane to grate my Parmesan cheese because I do like to buy it in the big block. And then to cut through all of that cheese, we are going to add some lemon zest. And you can definitely taste a difference when you add the lemon zest versus when you don't add the lemon zest to this recipe. And I really like it a lot more with the lemon zest. It adds so much freshness and really lightens up the cheese. And next we'll go ahead and add some salt and pepper to our bowl. And then we'll set the bowl aside while we chop up our basil leaves. I'm using Italian basil that I grew in my garden, and I'm simply just going to bunch up the leaves and give it a rough chop. You want to make sure the pieces are relatively small just so that they mix in well to the ricotta mixture. Of course, for the full measurements and directions, you can find them all on my blog, and I'll have the link to that in the description box below. And then once your basil's chopped up, add it into the ricotta mixture and then give everything a good mix with a spoon. Once everything is mixed together, we're going to set our ricotta aside and then we're going to line up our squash and get ready to stuff them. So to stuff the patty pan squash, I like to use a tablespoon because my patty pan squash were relatively large, but I add about a tablespoon to start into each patty pan squash, and then I like to go ahead and top it up, sort of creating a dome on top of the patty pan squash with any of the leftover ricotta mixture I have. Once all of your patty pan squash are stuffed with the ricotta filling, set them aside and we'll prepare our baking dish. Now to prepare it, all you have to do is set it down and then place some tomato sauce inside. I like to do a couple scoops just to get the entire bottom of the pan covered, and here I'm using my homemade tomato sauce, but if you like, you can use your favorite jarred tomato sauce here in replacement. So we're just going to spread out the tomato sauce so it's in a good layer on the bottom of the pan, and then we'll add in our patty pan squash. I really like to try to fit as many squash as I can in the baking dish, and it doesn't really matter too much if they touch because they do shrink a little bit as they bake and they do not stick to each other. And once all your squash have been added to the pan, I'm just going to go in with a little bit more tomato sauce, making sure it comes up to about a third of the way up each of the patty pan squash. This will help them cook a little bit more even and it'll impart really great flavor. Then to bake, we are simply going to cover the baking dish with some aluminum foil and then place it into the center of the oven and cook it for about 45 minutes. This is normally enough time for the squash to cook all the way through and get nice and tender. After 45 minutes, remove your squash from the oven and remove the aluminum foil. We're going to test the doneness of the squash by pricking it with a fork, and if it goes in really easily, it is fully cooked and it's ready to eat. To serve up this dish, you can bring the entire baking dish full of the squash to the table and just have everyone pick up their own, but I actually like to plate it up, and it's really simple. All I do is I put 3 little squashes on a plate, top it up with a little bit more of the tomato sauce, and then I like to garnish with some basil leaves just for some extra freshness, and of course a nice drizzle of olive oil because this is kind of an Italian dish and you always need a little bit of drizzle of olive oil at the very end. And there you have it, that's my recipe for ricotta-stuffed patty pan squash. Be sure to make this healthy and delicious summer recipe as soon as patty pan squash come into season where you are, and enjoy it as much as you can because we can only get it during the summer months. And so that is it for today's video. Don't forget, if you enjoyed it, please hit the like button down below, as well as the red subscribe button for more delicious recipes just like this one. Also, make sure to check me out on Instagram for more recipe ideas and inspiration, plus my blog to get this recipe for my ricotta stuffed patty pan squash and lots of other delicious seasonal recipes. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.